what we care about most is winning at all cost, at the cost of our character, our Christ-likeness, at the cost of our influence, and at the cost of evangelism.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. Hey, today we have Stanley in the house, and I couldn't be more excited. We're going to have a really transparent conversation on why picking sides sidelines the church, how to respond to critics, and more. And hey, before we get started, please know the purpose of this podcast is educational and informational. I've got a variety of perspectives represented throughout this series, and this is part of a series on pastoring in a partisan age. So here's what I want you to do. Play nice in the comments, keep it civil, because the goal of this series is educational and to help you diffuse the conflict that the culture is experiencing right now. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by My Ultimate Guide to Healthy Church Conflict. If you want to start leading a more united church, download My Ultimate Guide to Healthy Church Conflict at churchconflictguide.com. And by Glue Plus, the new Glue Plus membership from Glue offers your church free texting, time-saving resources, a new mover program, and discounts on digital and physical resources. You're probably already buying at full price. Visit glue.us/plus and use my code CAREY20 for 20% off. And now to my conversation with Stanley. Andy, great to have you back on the podcast, and thanks for helping us kick off this series.
Yeah, well, something near and dear to my heart, and it's just interesting to me, Carey, that you're so interested in this being a Canadian. I mean, not that you shouldn't care, but you're so dialed into this whole crazy conversation. So anyway, thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yep.
Well, most of our audience is American, like 80% of podcast listeners are US. And then, Mark Sayers and I have talked about it. Mark will be on this, but I think sometimes it's helpful to have that like slightly out of country viewpoint, where you're kind of on the outside looking in. And then talking to people like you who obviously have done rounds of this, and really grateful that you would kick us off in this series. So, no secret, almost every leader is nervous about what's coming down the pipe in the next few months.
Yeah.
In 2020, you argue, and I really appreciated your contribution on this, that we discovered what most evangelicals value most. So far in the culture wars and the partisanship and the ideologies, what is it that we apparently seem to value most?
Well, it appears, and again, we're talking in broad generalities, and I mean, and you know this, but I'll just say it. And your podcast listeners are smart; they know this too. The people who are loudest get all the attention, and it's next thing you know, it's like all the evangelicals, just like all the Democrats, all the Republicans. So of course, all doesn't apply to anybody. But in terms of the quote supposed leaders among evangelicals, it certainly appeared a few years ago that what we supposedly cared most about was winning. We just felt like we needed to win. And when I saw your questions, I actually added, I said, if I were writing that again, I would add that we want to win. What we care about most is winning at all cost, at the cost of our character, our Christ-likeness, at the cost of our influence, and at the cost of evangelism. Just all those things out the window. We just got to win. And it appears, again, from the outside looking in, and again, even some of my friends, it appears that we're more committed to a kingdom of our own making than we are the kingdom of Christ, for which the church and you and I as individuals, we're supposed to be like a commercial announcement of things to come, that we're supposed to be walking, talking representatives of another kingdom. I mean, how many times did Jesus say the kingdom of God is like, the kingdom of heaven is like? I mean, he was as well. So we've allowed some secondary issues to become primary issues. And at the end of the day, we've slided away. And it's heartbreaking. And it's not better than it was a few years ago when we started talking about this. It's worse, at least from my estimation. So anyway.
What do you think makes us so gullible in this area, so susceptible to want to win, to wade into the culture wars, the partisanship, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Okay. Again, you're interviewing me, so these are my opinions. I feel like they're somewhat educated opinions. Been through several rounds of this. I really think it boils down to maybe a fundamental misunderstanding about the difference between being biblical and being Christ-like. Mm-hmm. And whenever I talk about this, I get in trouble because people say, Andy doesn't believe the Bible. Well, anybody that knows me or listens to me preach consistently knows that's absurd. But there's a big difference between being biblical and Christ-like. And here's what I would just suggest the audience listen for. Listen for how many times evangelicals in particular, but conservative Christians and fundamentalists specifically, when they make their case about infusing politics into the church and politics, and we represent the kingdom of God and the kingdom, the world's coming to an end. Listen for how many times you hear the word biblical versus listen to how many times you hear the word Christ-like. And as I argue in Not In It to Win It, we are partisans of a king. That's what the word Christian means. When the Christians and Jesus followers in Antioch, and you know this, when they were the first time the term Christian was used, it was a derogatory term. It was a political term. It wasn't religious. It's like if you were a Herodian, it was your follower of Herod, Caesarian, the followers of Caesar. And Christione was a follower of this invisible crucified king, Christ. So we're supposed to be Christ-like. And there is a difference between trying to be biblical and Christ-like. So just listen to that terminology, because the reason this gets confusing, and I think the reason so much of it's gone off the rails, is we have raised generation after generation after generation of Christians who feel like, oh, I'm supposed to live out something that's biblical versus being like Christ. And to be Christ-like narrows our options significantly. And being Christ-like is prescribed to us. It's not suggested to us. It is prescribed to us. When Jesus said, all authority in heaven and on earth belongs to me, there's no wiggle room. He's the king. So again, if you lose sight of that, and then last thing, it's so interesting too, Carey, and every Christian knows this, every pastor's preached this passage. The last temptation that Jesus faced in Matthew chapter 4 was Satan takes him to this high mountain and says, I want you to look at all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. I have the authority to give this to you. And Jesus said, no, thanks. It's not why I've come. And what have we done as conservative Christians? Suddenly we've decided, no, we'll take that. We'll take the kingdoms of this world. We'll take the kingdom of the United States and the UK, and we want to create some sort of theocracy. It's right there in the Bible. The one of the temptations was to opt for power over Christ-likeness. And the moment we do that, we've lost sight of the script, and here we are. So long answer to your question. I'm sorry. I'll
great answer.
Try to be shorter. Yeah.
To the question. But you've this isn't your first rodeo. You've been through a few elections as a lead pastor. North Point's what, 29 years old. Mm-hmm. Wow. And then, growing up, you had a front row seat with your dad, Dr. Charles Stanley, watching this. I would love your reflection on how you have seen the position of Christians change over the course of your lifetime, or even the course of your leadership. Because it feels to me, and feel free to disagree, that the posturing that Christians have done continues to intensify. Or was it always this bad, and we just have a romantic view of the past?
Well, I think this thread has been here. It's been here as long as I can remember. And you brought up a point, I probably wouldn't have brought it up. But, my dad was played a pretty major part of the resurgence in the Southern Baptist Convention way back in the 90s. And I remember I got to sit in on meetings, got invited to things just because I was his son. And there was something about it, even though it was the battle for the Bible, and I'm all for, hey, let's battle for the Bible. The Bible's preeminent. But the way things were done and the things that were said and the posture that was taken, as I have matured, honestly, in my own faith and honestly in my own understanding of the Gospels, just my personal Bible study. So much of that, even though the end seemed like the right end, it certainly didn't justify the means, because the means was simply we picked up the tactics and the approach and the tools of the kingdoms of this world, and we went to war on behalf of Jesus, a little bit like the Crusaders. Criticism, undermining, not always telling the truth, powering up, taking over, all those things. Again, follow Jesus through the Gospels. You see not only do you see none of that, you see him resisting that. My favorite is they're on their way to Jerusalem, Jesus sends the disciples ahead to a village in Samaria. We need to spend the night somewhere. Ask them if we can spend the night in their village. The Samaritans say no. And two of the disciples are like, Jesus, do you want us to call down fire from heaven and burn the whole place down? In other words, how dare they not let the Son of Man spend the night in their village? Do you want us to destroy them all? This is at the end of 3 years of Jesus, and he looks at them like—
It didn't all sink in, did it?
No, it's like, what are you talking about? But to answer your question, it is in us. It was in them. There is going to probably always be this thread that not just through evangelical Christianity, but all of Christianity. And there's, again, as soon as we do that, we've already lost. Even if we get our bill passed, even if we get our candidate elected, we've already lost because we have dipped down into a world that Jesus, standing on the mountain, however that works, seeing the kingdoms of the world, said, don't want it. Don't want what you're offering. Don't want the way you're offering it. I've come for something completely different. I have come as the Savior of the world. My news is going to be good news of great joy for every person who is born on planet Earth. And what you're offering me, the way that I would have to get to what you're offering me, I would abandon all that. So I'm not suggesting this is simple, and I don't want to be simplistic, but so much of what we're seeing Christians use the language they're using, and because again, the end justifies the means. It's a little heartbreaking.
Yeah. So the two dominant approaches that we see a lot of church leaders take in a season like this or an era like this is put your head in the sand, hope it goes away. And I got to be honest with you, that's probably my inclination. It's like, I'm going to put my head. I don't think that's your inclination. You have found a way to keep speaking up on issues that you're passionate about, sometimes at great personal cost. And we'll go there later. But the other approach, and I don't want to suggest this is your approach because it's not, but it's put your head in the sand. This is probably me, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this series. Or pick a partisan candidate and tell everyone to vote for them. Yeah. Right? This is how we take back Washington. This is how we take back the governorship. This is how we take back the Supreme Court. Take back
the nation. Yeah.
Take back the nation. What is wrong with both approaches or either approach?
Well, again, if my ultimate authority as a Christian is a follower of Jesus, then he has prescribed my tone, my posture, and my approach to all things in my home, in my community, the way I approach politics. It has been prescribed to us. We get to choose whether or not we follow Jesus. We don't get to choose what following Jesus looks like. It's written on the bottle. The directions are written on the bottle. So neither of those approaches reflect Jesus. If we stick our head in the sand, Jesus didn't do that. Again, he offended both the temple and the empire. Both of them wanted him on their side. He said, no, I've not come to take sides. As Tony Evans said years ago, I've come to take over. And so he faces down injustice, regardless of which side it's coming from. He faces down people who are in groups who are taking advantage of people who were easy to take advantage of. He elevated the status of women. In other words, he had a kingdom agenda, and he stuck with his kingdom agenda. And meanwhile, the political forces are swirling around. What was happening in Jerusalem during that time was extraordinarily political. You had zealots, you had the priests who'd kind of sold out, the Sadducees who definitely sold out, the Romans who were just trying to keep the taxes. I mean, so political. Jesus just threads the needle and refuses to take sides and just sticks with his agenda, sticks with his kingdom. And of course, as I say all the time, and today, the Roman Forum is a tourist attraction. There's no temple. And here we are, a third of the world's population celebrates Jesus. So sticking our head in the sand is certainly not the approach. But here's the thing. When a church or a group of churches decides to push a candidate, in that moment, even if it's the godliest candidate, they have undermined the purpose of the church, because we are called to make disciples. And the moment I advocate for a candidate, I have decided not to make disciples of half the nation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, suddenly I've decided I'm only going to make Republican disciples because Democrats aren't going to come to my church, or vice versa, because I've taken a stand for a candidate. And here's the other thing. And again, everybody knows this. It's like political candidates, and these are wonderful men and women. I'm so great men and women step up to spend their lives serving our country and passing bills and sitting through long board. I'm so grateful. So this is not a knock, but they're here today and they're gone tomorrow. Our King is forever. And many Christian political leaders understand that. There are many, many, many fine Christian men and women who totally get this, and they are as dismayed at what's going on as some of us are. So Jesus refused to come down to the level of delving into which party he was going to support. And as the church, we should be the conscience of the nation. We should be the conscience of the nation to be able to call out people on the left, right, and in the middle when other people are injured or harmed. So we reduce our position and we do reduce our influence when we stick our head in the sand, or when we go all in on a candidate because, again, you've just said to half the country, hey, we're not interested in ministering to you because, you're not going to, because we've already offended you before we begin the conversation. Anyway, you get the point.
So this is interesting. I never know where these conversations are going to go. And surprise, surprise, we often record the interviews out of the order that they are broadcast. So you're the first in this series for the interviews, but I've done some of the other ones already that are coming up. And what's interesting, because I didn't know what people were going to say, is pretty much everyone, and I haven't done all the interviews yet, but Ed Stetzer, N.T. Wright, Michael Ware have all said, sticking your head in the sand is not a godly option, and would agree that neither is endorsing a particular slate or candidate or picking a side in the culture war or platform, etc. And they're saying there's another way, and they all have their own particular take on it. But you have another way as well, and I would love for you, if it's not sticking your head in the sand or picking a slate.
Yeah.
Or deciding on whatever someone else says the agenda is, and then you actually just stamp it. Yeah. What should we do then?
Well, because I've talked about this so much in our churches, I have a phrase that I go back to over and over again. So I'll tease it out just a little bit since you asked this important question. The way forward is to disagree politically, disagree culturally, disagree theologically, and love each other unconditionally. That's the way forward, is we disagree politically, we disagree culturally, we can even disagree theologically, but I can still love you unconditionally. And that's not weak. That is mature. And here's the thing, newsflash, this is exactly what Jesus did. On how many issues do you think the people Jesus ministered to, how many issues did they line up with him perfectly when he showed up? I would say exactly zero. So he shows up in a world where everybody is wrong about most things. Think about that. Everybody he encounters is wrong about most things, and he loves them unconditionally and invites them to follow. That is the posture of the church. And a diverse group of men and ultimately women came together who normally would have not given each other the time of day. They hated each other, or at least were offended by each other. And here's why this is effective, Carey. And this is why it is the way forward. This is effective because we're all wrong about something. And as long as I'm surrounded by and only listening to my tribe, I will continue to be confirmed in my error, which means I spend the rest of my life being wrong about something. I want to know where I'm wrong. I love what Adam Grant says. He says, when you find out you're wrong, you should celebrate. I'm not wrong anymore. For years, I've believed this. For years, I've thought this way. And I've just discovered I'm not wrong. I've been wrong, and now I'm not wrong anymore. So discovering where I have it wrong, along with others who assume that same posture, is the best way to get things right and do the right things. I want to say that again. If I can surround myself with other people who don't necessarily see the world the same way I do, but who recognize, hey, I have something to learn and I have things where I need to grow and change as well. When those kinds of people come together with that same posture, it is the best way to get things right and to do the things that make the biggest difference. This is why most people in our country and in Canada, we actually live and shop and go to school and work in the middle. We don't live in the extremes that we get dragged to during an election cycle. We live in the middle where we discover where we're wrong, make things right, and then do the right thing. So it's simple. It's exactly what Jesus said. We disagree politically, we can disagree culturally, we can disagree theologically, but because we choose to love each other unconditionally, we can talk and we can have nuance and we can go, and we can enter into each other's life experiences. And where people disagree most vehemently are where they've not taken the time to experience or to dip into other people's life experiences. Again, as I tell our churches all the time, the further away you are from a problem, the simpler the solution appears to be. The further away you are from a problem, the simpler the solution appears to be. So if you are far away from a group of people's lived experience, then you are confident you know the solution to their problem, and you're wrong. And they are equally as wrong about solving the problems they think I've created in my lived experience. But when we come together, we all say, oh, I didn't know. And now we've learned, and now we're making progress. And here's the thing, just lots of conversations I've had behind the scenes with people. There are so many extraordinary Republicans and Democrats in this country that would hear what I just said and say, that is exactly my posture. I care about the people in my community. I care about the people in my state. I care about the people in this nation. And I'm looking for a group of people that will say, hey, we disagree culturally, politically, and maybe even theologically, but we can respect and honor each other, and we can talk about these things. So that is the way forward. But interestingly enough, that was Jesus' way forward. And as Christians, we should be able to lead the way. Unfortunately, in some cases, we're creating the division. So thanks for asking. Hey, but here's what I need to ask you, though. Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure that my answer to that question lined up with N.T. Wright's and Ed Stetzer's, because I love those guys. So if my answer was different, just go with their answer. I think those guys are smarter than me. But anyway.
You know, Andy, I've seen, because we've known each other for 20 years, I think now almost. I've watched you go through different rounds where people who are very disagreeable decide that they're going to disagree with you. And I also know, more than the headlines, that you'll often call those people. You'll often, DM them and say, hey, can we jump on a conversation? Yeah. If they're local, you'll go to coffee with people. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think you've got scars and you have paid a very high price for doing exactly what you say. It's like, all right, I'm going to go and have a conversation with my critic.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what that looks like in your life? I
would, and I really wish I could talk publicly about the last conversation I had with somebody who got on multiple stages and trashed me. Basically, I just sat there watching this thinking, they're not exaggerating something I said or did. They're just making stuff up in front of several thousand people. And then I went to this person's podcast, and because somebody sent me, horrible, misleading things. So I did what I do. I found a friend who had contact information. And I finally, I texted him, and then I called him and I said, hey, what are you talking about? Where did you? Well, very, very defensive. They're always very defensive because they've already gone public with,
Andy Stanley is.
Oh, absolutely. This one, the statement was that I won't even tell you what he said. Anyway, so very defensive, and then calms down. Then I ask about his family, and then, suddenly I'm a person. Suddenly we have different lived experience. I'm not just a square person on X, a square picture on X. I'm like a human being. And now, it's about 2 weeks later, this person texted me and said, I did a little more background checking. I looked into what you told me, and you're right. And I misrepresented you, and I'm gonna try to go to these same platforms and make this right. I said, hey, I appreciate it. And I didn't even ask you to do that. I just said, hey, before you talk about me, talk to me. Now you have my cell phone number. And hey, you can quote anything I've said and trash it, tear it apart. But the character assassination, that's middle school, okay? Christian, this is a guy who the banner over everything he does and says is because he's a Christian. I'm like, this is Christianity 101. So when I have an opportunity to do that, I do that. It's why I'm never critical of anybody by name. I'm just not going to do that. I don't want to undermine a potential relationship before it begins. And so that's just what I do. But hey, don't say, oh, Ed and Andy, great. No, this is I mean, this is 101 Christianity, right? This is how we're supposed to be. And if everybody would at least make an effort. And here's what I always get. Well, we tried to reach out. I'm like, they just lie. It's just so funny. We tried to contact your office. I'm like, are you kidding? Everybody, I mean, I'm so easy to, anyway. So I've just decided, track people down. And it is amazing, Carey, who's the telephone and cell numbers I've been able to get and the conversations I've been able to have. And I'm grateful. But I'm like, this is what we do. So anyway.
So I want a bit of an excursus here. I want to talk about that a little more in depth, because the posturing, the platform, and you were kind enough to be guest number 1 on this podcast almost 10 years ago when it started, and gave me a huge boost. And I'm so grateful for that, continue to be grateful for that to this day. And, here I am still in my basement, but to say, Andy, that this has been a little more successful than I thought it would be is an understatement. And
well, you've worked hard and you're really good at this. So let's,
Well, thank you. But it's way exceeded. And people ask me, well, how to grow it? How do you grow it? One of the things I figured out along the way, maybe starting 8 or 10 years ago, was there's a fast way to grow traffic. And the way I could have done it is I could have said, why Andy Stanley is I'm going to pick another good friend here of both of ours, why Andy Stanley is a better communicator than Craig Rochelle, or why Craig Rochelle can beat Andy Stanley in the gym, which I know isn't true, Andy, but, theoretically, we'll just play along with me. If you start doing trash talk headlines, I can get 10x the traffic.
Yep.
And I would never do that. Number one, I respect and love both of you as leaders. And secondly, if you and I had a disagreement, we'd talk about it. We would talk about it. That does not belong online, but it's a super fast way to grow traffic. It's a way to grab headlines. I just love your thoughts on that, because I also hear from a lot of young leaders who are starting platforms, and that's a very dark way to get traffic.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Andy?
Well, it works.
It does work.
It works.
Yeah, it works.
I mean, I don't, nobody cares how many planes landed safely today. We want to know about the one that didn't. Nobody, I mean, again, it's this, currently, we don't name names because everybody knows, but currently we've had 3 or 4 major evangelical leaders who've had some sort of moral failing or step back or whatever.
Yep.
And so, of course, X, or I keep calling it Twitter, X is all about, and not so much Instagram, but other social media. It's like the evangelical church, mega churches, they're all full of this and full of that. They should be shut down, because of these examples. Well, there are like 2,500 mega churches in the United States. Most people couldn't name 10 megachurch pastors. But
True.
The bad news is so much more interesting than what happens in the middle, and people live in the middle. And so, yes, you're right. If you want to, if the further left or right you go, you can pick up followers. You get more advertising. All the chickens kind of run to one side of the hen house or the other. So, yeah, and so way to go for not doing that. It's a lot harder, but you've got more. But the problem with the people who do that, they have to get more and more and more extreme, because that's what people are accustomed to, and they're some of them are sort of running out of juice. And I don't know what's going to happen when this current wave of dysfunction goes away and there's another one. I guess they just pick up on that. But and here's the thing. And before we change the subject, that's fine. I mean, we're I'm an American, so I won't say we're all Americans. But in the United States, you can do that. You have the freedom to do that. I love the fact that it's the freedom to do that. I just want to say to the Christians who are doing that, wait a minute. You're a Christian. You don't get a pass. You're a follower of Jesus. So if you want to do that, but please don't mix it up with Christianity and put your cross out there and refer to the Bible and Jesus said and God. To blend those two things, I mean, if James is correct and James' brother Jesus, I think he was correct, everything he wrote, you have to give an account for the fact that you leveraged your king in order to criticize another group of people. It's like, what? So go 100% secular and scream and yell and cuss and criticize. But goodness gracious, don't try to blend that with the teaching of Jesus. I just don't understand that. Maybe I'm I mean, I guess I'm somewhat naive, but that just seems really clear to me. But anyway.
I agree. You know, one of the criticisms I get of my writing is, how come there's no Bible in it? Like, you're a Christian. And I'm like, well, because I'm giving you my opinion about leadership. I don't want to use John Acuff's phrase, I don't want to Jesus juke you. I don't want to say, this is a pronouncer from on high, everybody listen. You know, if I'm clear about something, I might use the scripture once in a while. If I'm preaching, whole other story. Yeah. But yeah, well said. So, Andy, you've had hundreds of, I don't think I'm exaggerating, hundreds of one-on-one conversations with critics, both outside and inside your church, right? And those are people who threaten to leave, people who did leave,
right?
People who don't like the teaching anymore. It's too this, it's too watered down, it's too whatever, you know, just they left. Pastors hate that stuff. I'm sure you don't wake up excited about it in the morning when that's on your agenda. What are some tips that you have on how to have those conversations for people when the person you're meeting with, and for most of us, it's not going to be headlines. It's not going to be, I got criticized in front of thousands of people. For most of us, it's going to be so-and-so's leaving the church. They're mad and they're taking 20 people with them. You better have coffee with them. What is your advice on how to handle a conversation like that?
Well, first, I've not been successful in those conversations. If success means when we're finished, they're like, oh, wow, well, never mind. I'm back. I just needed more information. Most of those conversations, and I don't know that you're exaggerating, between COVID and the current situation, because I've met with small groups who were all up in, I'm like, I'll just come to your small group. You know, you don't have to report back, just invite me. So I've not been successful at that in terms of, I probably have 8 out of 10 of those conversations. I don't change anybody's mind, but I am a pastor first and foremost. My primary audience is not a podcast audience or television audience. My primary audience is our local church. That's who I love. That's what I love to do. So when I would find out somebody's leaving, first thing is, how involved are they? How long have they been here? Because the longer they've been here, the more they've served. Gosh, I don't want them to just disappear without a conversation. And I always call. I always make myself available. And I'm busy, like every pastor's busy, and I get tired of having the same conversation over and over and over. But these two crisis points coming out of COVID, and then the current political situation, and then the conference that we had last year, those were legit. I mean, people had legitimate questions, and because of all the misinformation in our case, of course they did. So I'm like, hey, I'm sort of to blame, I guess, for this because I'm the leader. So let's have the conversation. So to answer your question to pastors, calling people back, making yourself available. Hey, I'd love to come over. Hey, I'd love for you to come over. Your whole group's mad. What if I just come to your home, to your small group? And in most cases, people won't necessarily want to have the conversation. But I think the best thing we can do is to make ourselves available and listen. Not because you're going to change a lot of minds. You might. For sure, you'll learn some things. And what I learned is that, and this isn't a shock to any pastor out there, what I learned, the presenting issue is never the issue. Ever. And the other thing I discovered, or that I was reiterated for me, is most people are unaware, and I'm probably the same way. Most people are unaware of the real issue because we live in the world of presenting issues because it's easy. The presenting issue, I'm right. I know I'm right. And I've got energy. Once you diffuse my initial energy and we get down to the real issues, now it's complicated. It's not as clear. I don't have as much energy. I can't argue as hard because, yeah, it's true. I've never met these people. Yeah, it's true. I've never had that life experience. No, it just gets more complicated. And so I would, in these conversations, I would try to gently get past the presenting issue to the core issues. And then I would just sit back and decide, okay, do they want to go there? Great, I will. If not, my work here is done. And so off we go.
Let's go deeper on that. The presenting issue is never the real issue.
Rarely.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Here's an example. A 3-generation family. So there's parents, their kids, and their grandkids. Everybody's leaving the church. So the parents, the older couple, I say older, they're my age. They come in, and I invited them in. I've known them for years. They've been involved. They raised their kids, and now they're grandkids. So this is and they went on and on and on and on and on and on. And I listened, I asked questions, and here's another little tip for pastors or anybody: listen for emotion. I mean, there's lots of information, but you watch what a person gets most amped up about, and you look for the thing that creates deep emotion, like tears. And during this conversation, as we were talking, I realized what their real issue is I have embarrassed them in front of their friends.
Oh.
Now, that's not why they came in. In fact, I don't think it ever dawned on them. But as they talked, and they were so angry, and why would we do this, and da-da-da-da-da-da. But every once in a while, they would talk about, their friends. And then I noticed the particular wife, when she started talking about her Bible study, the women in her Bible study, she got very emotional. So I let them finish. And then I said, hey, because I've known him for a long time. I said, hey, can I just make an observation? I said, I think what's behind your anger is I embarrassed you, and I want to apologize for that. And of course, I didn't do it on purpose, but I totally get how what was out there in the media and what we did as a church, you weren't able to defend your own church and your own pastor, and I embarrassed you, and I'm so sorry. And they both started weeping. Now, they left the church, and their kids and grandkids, everybody's gone as far as I know. They haven't come back. But you know what? It was so friendly at the end, and there was just but again, presenting issue, real issue. And I'm not a counselor, and I don't think we have to try to get people there necessarily. But I just want to encourage pastors and say this. Try not to take offense at the presenting issue. There's generally more going on behind the scenes, either that has nothing to do with your church, nothing to do with your preaching, but they bring that energy with them because, hey, I've got something I can kind of pack it all around. I can't believe you said this, preach this, wouldn't do this. Pastor, why don't you take a stand? To which, I always say, I have taken a stand. I just didn't take your stand, because you don't really want me to just take a stand. You want me to take your stand. And I have taken a stand. I am a follower of a king. And if it ain't good news, it's not the right version of, the message of Jesus. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but
that is extremely helpful. So I don't know whether you'd be familiar with his work or not, but there's a professor, a writer, a negotiator named Yuri. And I've been studying him from law school on. It's almost mandated at law school that you read him and Roger Fisher. And I had the privilege of having him on the podcast. And he's negotiated everything from Middle East peace to, remember when it was Trump and North Korea about nuclear arms going to blow up the world? He was involved in that. And basically, he de-escalates conflict. And William was brilliant, was very generous with his time. And I tested a theory I had with him that, could have gone down in smoke. But I've said it for years to leaders when I've been counseling them. It's like 95% of the problems in the church have nothing to do with the church. And he agreed. And when you can get to the emotion underneath that, when you listen for that language, this is a business dispute, 2 billionaires fighting for a decade. It was destroying their lives, right? Just really a contest of one against the other. And he listened for something, and he said he's trying to get past positions to interest, and he hears, the guy spoke Portuguese, and he said something, I'm going to get it wrong, like liberdade, but he said it with such force. And it was like, liberty, that's what you're after? Freedom? Tell me about that. And as he dug down, he found out that he was held hostage as a young man. And he felt hemmed in by this. And then he broke down in tears. This 80-year-old billionaire executive breaks down in tears. And the next thing you know, they agreed on terms and settled the deal. But I don't think he knew that was driving him. And I found, in my experience, Andy, I've had people so mad at me because I was changing the church, but you really drill down and they were mad because their kids weren't coming, or their kids liked it more than they did, or that, their wife was terminally ill, or that they had a child who was really struggling with an addiction and on the verge of going to rehab, or those other life issues. Has that ever presented in all your years of pastoring?
Absolutely. I mean, people are afraid of things. People are insecure about things. Everybody has a past. Everybody has parents. Everybody has some dysfunction. And I'm not saying those people out there. All of us carry that stuff into every relationship, right?
100%.
Every single one. And as you get older, I mean, I know for me, I hopefully, you develop some self-awareness. And for me, I've just learned when I'm angry, I'm like, okay, Andy, I just assume the target of my anger is not my issue. I just assume that. I'm like, okay, you want to go in there and say this, you want to go in there, okay, Andy, what's really going on here? What are you mad about really? And generally, if I just sit back, I finally get there. I mean, even on a Sunday morning, I'll get in and we're doing warm up and music and all this stuff, and I'll be so frustrated about something. And I know if I'm not careful, I'm going to take it out on the people around me. Right. I'm just going to be a little short and snippy. I'm like, okay, Andy, what's wrong with you? Are you kidding? You have everything in the world to be grateful for. What's wrong with you? Well, I wasn't always that way. I certainly wasn't that way in my 20s, or I don't think in my 30s. So, but if we can all just have a little version of that, then you can pretty much get along with anybody and solve just about anything. So yeah, the presenting problem. And again, where this manifests itself in evangelicalism right now. And I don't want to get too specific because it'll take people's minds off what we're talking about. There are 2 or 3 really hotbed issues, 2 in particular, that are, as soon as you put those out there, everybody's amen, and we're ready to take, hell with a water pistol because these issues are so clear. I'm telling you, I've had so many conversations with people who come in. Those are front burner issues. They no more really care about those issues than the man in the moon. They've never met anybody that struggles with whatever it is. They've never met a person who's been through that. Those, again, is something so far away that I can get amped up about it because it's crystal clear what those people need to do. And when they come in with that kind of energy and anger, it's like, okay, seriously, that's generally a telltale sign that somebody really hasn't dealt with their own stuff, but they found something else to hang it on. And that's part of just the role of being a pastor, helping people sort through all that. But I think there is a ton of that in what's happening in politics in America, because I can say this since I'm an old white guy. The old white guys feel like I don't feel this way, that they're losing control, they're losing the country, they're losing respect, and now we have a candidate that's going to represent us. Oh yeah, but by the way, I go to church every Sunday. I'm sure Jesus must feel the same way, and we all wrap our ideology with a little bit of theology, and now God is on our side and against the other people, and Jesus is just like, oh my gosh, they still want to torch the Samaritans. I mean, are they not paying attention? They got 4 versions of my life and they're, still trying to torch the Samaritans. So anyway.
Well, you really study history, and I'm certainly a huge fan of America. Spent a lot of time there, married an American, the whole deal. But some would say that this is characteristic of a declining empire. That when you look at, you've studied Rome, you've studied ancient history. I know you read widely in that area. Any thoughts on that? And, as you look at the global imbalance and you look at, like Britain, well, my background, Holland was the superpower of the 16th century. Nobody knows that. Nobody remembers that. You go to Holland, this little docile country in Northwest Europe, right? And it's like, you were a superpower.
But they own the seas. If you owned the seas, you own trade, you own the world. That's right.
100%. Portugal, Spain for a while, England, we all kind of have some memory of England, if not, more recent. And then the American Empire, but now you look at India, you look at China, you look at other powers, and the truce, the peace has been broken and the equilibrium dislodged. Any thoughts about what happens when an empire struggles?
Well, let me just respond to what you said. I'm not worried about that for the United States for multiple reasons. And I'm no prophet, and I'm not an actual historian. I just like history.
Yeah, you do read a lot.
But I'm not concerned about that for multiple reasons. One, we are sea to shining sea. We are in the perfect climate. We're gigantic. We are a world unto ourselves, even though we should not retreat to be a world unto ourselves. Our country is so healthy right now. You would know it. If you listen to half the people in the United States, you think the world's coming to an end. But historically, I mean, what's happening in the United States and Canada is remarkable. It's safer than it's ever been, even though people don't acknowledge that. But because we know everything about everybody, every story of tragedy gets escalated and we think, oh, it's happening all the time everywhere. Not true. So the negative narrative is way exaggerated. Okay, that's one thing. And that's easy to document. So I'm not worried about that. And I don't think historically what has happened to empires happens anymore because, again, we're still I got to summarize it so I don't go too long. The cry of the human heart is for freedom, period. Period. It's freedom. I want to be free, and I want to be in an environment where I have maximum freedom, and I'm willing to govern my freedom so as not to impose on your freedom. And any system of government that does the work of maximizing individual freedom and guarding the individual freedom so that when our freedoms bump into each other, there's somebody to set up guardrails so we don't just destroy each other. That is the evolution of the world politically, and economically. And again, there's some holdouts. I mean, China's a bit of a holdout. Obviously, North Korea is like a major holdout. Iran, a major holdout. But, Martin Luther King Jr. gets credit for the quote. I don't know who originally said it, and I'm going to butcher it. But, the arc of history, or the
arc quote? Of history bends toward justice?
Bends toward justice. When I'm not trying to think of it, I can usually quote it. Yeah, the arc of history bends towards justice. And that is true of the human heart as well. And that is the gospel. When Jesus made the statement, you shall know the truth shall make you free, it is such a gigantic statement. But truth requires clarity, and anything that fogs my vision robs me of truth, which robs me of freedom. And this is the other brilliant thing Jesus said in this regard. This is why he said, okay, and he would say, Democrats, Republicans, time out. Before you attempt to take the speck out of your brother and political opponent's eye, first, don't leave me here for those of you that know this, what he says next. He says, first take the log out of your own eye, and that's where we generally leave off with our memory. And then he says this, take the log out of your own eye so that you will see clearly to be able to remove the speck from your brother's eye. This is a 100% relational equation, and it begins with we all look in the mirror to say, I bet I'm wrong about something, but I don't know what it is. So I'm going to get with a group of people that sees the world differently than me, and we're going to learn from each other. We're going to solve this together. So clarity allows us to recognize truth, and truth sets us free. This is why the church should be leading the charge into the middle ground where problems are actually solved and issues are actually resolved. We have the message, we have the messenger, we have the king who did it and visually did it on the cross where he took upon himself all of our misunderstanding and all of the lies we've believed and all the shrapnel of the sin and the debt we created between us and our Heavenly Father, took all that upon himself, said, okay, I've cleared the decks. Now, let's move forward. Let's disagree politically, disagree culturally, disagree theologically, but your mandate is to love unconditionally. It is, and I promise I'll stop after this, it is not to be, should not be lost on us that Jesus' final activity before he was arrested and went to the garden to pray was that he washed his disciples' feet. And it took him a long time. And he said, now that I've done that for you, you do that for each other, period. I don't care if you agree with each other or not, get along or not, ever come to the same conclusions about, but you wash each other's feet. And you know what that does? Washing feet forces me to be close to you. And when I'm close to you, the temperature comes down in our relationship. So we have all the tools, we have the model, we have a king. We should get this right. So
what I'm picking up as a theme in this series, again, as it's coming together, is, I think everybody so far would agree that clarity is kindness. And, I've heard you talk about clarity, and that's one thing you are, Andy, is you are clear, such a wordsmith. What should we be clear about? Like if you're preaching in the next couple of months, heading into a very divided fall, what do you think we have the opportunity to be clear about? I mean, if you're picking a partisan side, that's clear. Vote this way.
So easy. So easy.
Easy peasy. But
let's say here's who to hate, here's who to vote for.
Exactly. So that's one form of clarity. You're not advocating that. But sticking your head in the sand, a lot of people are like, I'm not going there. And then people are like, where do we stand? It's like, not answering that question, And then you get into personal conversations where things become more nuanced, right? So from the front with a microphone, where should you or where could you be clear in a season like this?
Well, so your audience knows you sent me these questions ahead of time, which I appreciate because none
of them are actually what I said I was going to ask.
No. I think this is great, Carey. We know each other, but I like to be prepared, as you know. I'm just a stickler. So one of the questions, because I want to read the way you wrote. I mean, what you just asked is kind of a version of the question, and the question you wrote was, Andy, what are you going to say as the fall approaches, and what's the alternative path? So as we get closer to November, Andy, what are you going to say? And I wrote in my notes, I don't know yet.
Because you're not the only large church pastor who's told me that, Andy.
I'm going to address it. I sort of have this thematic message I do kind of different versions of that's called avoiding election infection, because we get infected and then we don't love each other anymore. So I don't know exactly what my message is going to be, but I guarantee it's going to come back to this. And in fact, this Sunday, I'm going to talk about this as kind of a warm-up as we get close to the fall. I tell our churches all the time, our diversity is our strength. Our racial diversity, our cultural diversity, our theological diversity, our lived experience diversity is our strength as a local church, because we are to model what the kingdom of God looks like. And it doesn't look just like me, and it doesn't look just like you, and it doesn't sound just like me. So our diversity, the fact that we don't agree politically, culturally, theologically, and yet we can love unconditionally. We are a picture. We are an advertisement of the kingdom of God when at the end of time, the New Jerusalem comes and the king comes. I love what John says. He comes to dwell with men. And remember, it's not the first time he dwelt with men. It's the second time. And the first time when he showed up, everybody was wrong about just about everything. And he stuck around and launched his kingdom anyway. And we are to be the diverse people who have different lived experiences, who come together around what Jesus taught, because he is our king. So whatever I say in the fall, it's going to be really close to just reminding our people of that. So
when you look back on 2020, 2016, I mean, you usually do a series, and this goes back a long time. What did you get right about some of those past series? And what would you say, oops, stepped over a line, didn't realize it, wouldn't do that again?
On this topic, you mean?
Yeah, on politics or the culture wars, or, pick your topic.
I don't know that there was any giant mistake or anything. I felt like, I would like to go back and redo that. But I'll tell you why. It's not because I'm smart. It's because 12 to 14 people have my sermon outlines at least 3 weeks before I preach them. Mm-hmm. So if there are red flags in the outline, somebody or somebodies brings it to my attention, whether, hey, Andy, this word doesn't mean what you think it does. It used to mean this, now it means that. Or I think this is too harsh. Or all your examples are about men. Or, you've talked about this before. Or, so I invite feedback way before I strap on a microphone to preach. So that, I think, keeps me out of some of the ditches that I would have a tendency to go into when I let my emotion take over. And when I'm dealing with racial issues, I invite different people into that, the outline, not the outline process, but say, here's the outline. If you're sitting in the audience and you hear me say this, how's this going to land with you as a woman, as a Democrat, as a Republican, or somebody of different ethnic background? So because this is a minefield. I mean, the past 2 Sundays I preached to men. I had a Father's Day message that was too long, so I made it 2 messages. So part 1 and part 2, we had Father's Day 2 Sundays in a row. But preparing a message for men in this culture, not like it used to be, right? But I thought we got to do it anyway. So I had a bunch of people look at it. I sat down with our youngest lead pastors, went through the whole outline, Father's Day outline. How does this land? Is this, I think this is impactful. What do you think? So you got to wade in, can't sit back, got to love people. And again, as I always say, I realize I'm older. I got a big church. We can lose hundreds of people and the world doesn't come to an end. So that's a very unique situation. So I feel the pain of so many pastors who are trying to get this right. And just a few people from the wrong, demographic that leaves, it tanks the church, or somebody marches off, starts a different church. I understand the fear and I understand the concern. So can I read another answer I wrote down?
100%.
And then I know we probably got to go, but one of the question 19 was, okay, back to where we started. You said, I think a lot of pastors are afraid of their congregations. That is so true, Carey. And you're a pastor, so you get that, even though that's kind of hard to say. And then you said, if they say anything, it'll be wrong. If they don't say anything, they're not being strong enough. And then you said, what would you say to pastors? What would you say to pastors who are afraid right now? So here's what I wrote down. And I don't mean to be snarky or sarcastic, but this is the first thing that came to my mind when I think about pastors who are afraid of their congregations, okay? I wrote, Pastor, if you've ever preached a message on Daniel, David and Goliath, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you need to pull out your notes and follow your own direction. Because we have all stood up in front of our churches and talked about courage, and they trusted God, and they went through the fire, and they stared down the lions, and they stared down a Goliath, and we're just telling these people, trust God, fear not, fear not. It's our turn. It's our turn. This is our fire. This is our Goliath. These are our lions. Fear not. Let's model what we have preached and taught for years, not because it's easy, but when you put yourself in that vulnerable position, you have placed yourself in a position that maximizes God's opportunity to do something remarkable for you and through you. And do not miss that moment. And this cultural moment with this cultural tension that we're leading through and preaching through may be your moment to discover something about God, to discover something about God's faithfulness that you would never be able to learn any other way. So fear not because I told you not to, but because our King, fear not. He's with you.
That's a great word. I also love this format. I will just send you the questions, you read them, and then you answer them. That's a lot better than me coming up with spontaneous questions.
No.
Is there?
No, those are good questions.
All seriousness, is there another question you wish we would tackle? Because I got one or two more.
No, I think we've kind of...
Those are the stars.
Yeah.
You talk about the faith of the next generation, that the next generation is at stake in this ideological, polarized, tribalized world. The more we play into that, the more, if I understand your argument correctly, we are at risk of losing the next generation.
Yeah.
Playing into the... Talk about that, Andy.
Well, when we're talking about younger generation, what's interesting, we forget millennials are 40 now. Okay, they're not 18 anymore. It's like, what? When did that happen? I thought they were all 18. No, they're 40, right? They got kids.
You and I both have kids in our 30s. It's like, what?
Yes,
what
right.
just happened?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So unfortunately, what I think we're communicating at broad level, if we're not careful to the next generation, is this. They're going to be tempted to walk away from the church, not because they don't believe what the church teaches. They're going to be tempted to walk away because they're convinced we don't believe what the church teaches. Wow. Because when if a Christian or a pastor goes all in on a culture war issue, that younger generation realizes, wait a minute, I know people like that. I know people who've experienced that. I know people who are wrestling with that. And you've demonized them. You've said they're the enemy. You said that they're to be defeated and outvoted. And basically, you just wish that that whole group of people would disappear. These are my friends, and I don't necessarily agree with them either, but these aren't a category. This isn't a category for me. These are actual people. So if you are going to leverage the church and the power of church and the power of the pulpit in order to demonize a group of people that I actually love and I know God loves, then I'm not questioning my beliefs. I'm questioning the sincerity of your belief. And so the whole deconstruction movement is a group of people, for the most part, who are like, no, I still believe in God. I just gotta step back because I'm not sure my church leaders actually believe what I actually believe, that Jesus came to bring good news of great joy for all people. I'm not seeing much good news of great joy for all people at my church. So, I've got to step back. So it kind of comes back to a little bit of our own hypocrisy in terms of church leaders and what we represent. And the moment a pastor goes all in for the Republicans or all in for the Democrats or begins to demonize a group of people, and by demonize, they are the enemy, you have lost the plot line. If, as I tell leaders all the time, if you have to have an enemy in order to lead, you are a poor leader. That's why Jesus was the greatest leader. He said, I don't make enemies, and when I find somebody who calls me an enemy, I don't return the favor. I'm going to figure out how to love my enemies. Think of this, Carey. From the cross, if we believe that the Gospels are reliable accounts of actual events, which I do, from the cross, Jesus prays, Father, forgive the people that put me here. To the very end, I am not going to make them my enemies. And here's what's behind that. Father, forgive them for what they've done. They don't really know what they did because they don't have the truth. Consequently, they aren't free. And then he says to me, Andy, follow me. And you adopt my tone, my approach, you adopt my posture. And it doesn't matter if it works. It doesn't matter if you measure progress or not, because I'm your king. And I'm sitting here in a wonderful little studio with a microphone like I've got my act together. It's of course not. It's a daily struggle, but it's prescribed. I get to choose whether or not I follow Jesus, but once I decide to follow, I don't get to choose what it looks like. He made that clear.
Andy, I'll tell you, I've loved this conversation so much, and we've had a bunch on this podcast, but one of the reasons I love it is I feel like we got a little bit of a behind the scenes. Like, you meet with literally hundreds of people, probably in the last 5 or 6 years for all of the stuff. And a lot of listeners will know you through the headlines, through some of the people that love to criticize you, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I know, because we've known each other for so long, is that there's a lot of behind the scenes that never make the headline, a lot of conversations that kind of go nowhere and they leave anyway, or, that guy's still yelling at you through the headlines or whatever. But one of the things you told me, I've never mentioned this to you, it's not in the notes, is you said it might have been an aside. You may not even remember it, but if you remember it, I think it could be helpful. You said, hey, I think you were just talking to a group of us one day, and you said, if it ever gets really big or your church becomes successful, don't take the weird pill. Do you remember that? You said, don't take the weird pill.
Actually, it's something that another famous pastor said. He said, don't take the strange pill.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I've quoted that. Don't take the strange pill. Because guys, you've seen it. They just, I don't know what happens. It's always guys. They just get weird. They have
an
strange
entourage. They have to have their water at room temperature, whatever.
Yeah.
What? And I'm wondering if there's a tie-in to these culture wars. It is bizarre what we find ourselves in, this tribalized, ideological culture. The weird thing is to live by the headlines. The weird thing, the strange thing is to just shoot barbs over social media, over X, over, Facebook.
Yeah.
The hard thing, the humble thing, The difficult thing is to say, let's have coffee. Let's chat. Can you jump on a phone call? I've just learned so much for you. Any thoughts on that? Like the strange pill as far as this moment we're in culturally?
I don't know. I mean, I just watch pastors. I don't understand them sometimes, what they do, why they do what they do. And I'm not talking about immoral, crazy stuff. I'm just talking about what? But again, I'm older than a lot of them. And I'm willing to chalk it up to personality. And there's guys that are way more charismatic, just naturally than me, and more on fire and all that. So I get different styles and stuff. But, there's just some basic things, accountability and stuff, and staying healthy. And so I don't know really
talking
how to
people who
respond to
go
that.
to your church.
There's that. Yeah,
there's that.
Being accessible. Be accessible.
Yeah.
And being touchable, and being just sitting on the front row without people guarding you. And I don't know. And Carey, I'll tell you again, I had a huge advantage. I grew up with a famous father who was a pastor. I mean, everywhere we went, every restaurant, every place, I lived my life twice, really. I feel like I really do. So that's an advantage. It is, because I saw early on how important my dad was to people, and what stopping and speaking to people because of the way they esteemed him and how much they learned from him. And and people in my role, or pastors in communities where they're somewhat well known, your words, your pause, your eye to eye, your genuine concern, it is ministry. And I think growing up and seeing that, it's more intuitive for me to appreciate the power of that, not in a manipulative way, but just the power of presence and remembering a name, and pausing to pray for people in Home Depot, and praying for the guy I prayed with at CVS. He's kind of pouring out his heart. I'm like, let's pray right now. Put my hand on his shoulder right there in CVS. I'm like, that kind of thing used to be like, I'm not going to do that. You know what? Just got over it. It's like, hey, if God's given me this opportunity or stewardship of influence, it's person to person. It's one-on-one. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit about that. And thanks for humanizing and normalizing this bizarre cultural moment we're in.
Yeah. Thanks for having the conversation. Can I don't know about time, and you may cut this.
I got time.
I just wonder, I would like to read 3 verses of scripture that I think, again, this is so simple and so on point. And this is the Apostle Paul, Philippians chapter 2. Every pastor's preached it. Most Christians could quote some of this. But listen to these words. I mean, imagine if Jesus truly inspired Paul to write this, which we believe. And again, with Paul's experience, what he went through, can't imagine. And he says this, listen to this. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, here it is, value others above yourselves. What if we just did that? And then he says, and here it is, this will change your marriage. This would change the country. This would change the temperature of our country. In your relationships with one another, talking Christian to Christian, in your relationship, and it doesn't qualify which relationships, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, whose final activity with his disciples was he washed their feet. And then, but Paul says it this way, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, what is the same mindset? He goes, I'm about to tell you, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Jesus never leveraged who he was to benefit himself. That is amazing. It takes away all my excuses. It takes away all my right to demonize and criticize anybody. And it calls me to approach every relationship with the mindset of Christ Jesus, who came into this world where everybody had everything wrong, and he invited us to follow. Carey, imagine if that was the posture of the local church in America or Canada. Everything would change. We don't need more information. We just need a heck of a lot more application.
You know, I don't know about you. Sometimes I read a text like that, or Romans 12, I find particularly convicting once you get, past renewing your mind. I thought, if I camped out on these 10 verses for the rest of my life, I would have stuff to do every single day. Yep. Every day, I'm like, well, not there yet, not there yet. That's a beautiful place to stop. And just, Andy, I can't thank you enough. The book, by the way, came out a couple of years ago called Not In It to Win It. Very applicable for today. Really, really applicable, helpful. And you've helped me rethink more issues and become clearer in my communication than anyone else. And I just want to thank you so much, Andy. And
thanks, Carey.
Thanks for this conversation. It was very enlightening.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And I look forward to hearing the whole series. Who you've lined up it's fantastic. And to get to be a part of this, I'm honored. So thank you.